I planned my wedding for 18 months. Every detail, every flower, every song, I poured my heart into it. My fiancé, Derek, and I saved every penny because we wanted one day that was completely ours. What I didn't know was that my own mother and his mother had already decided that day would belong to them. It started small. "Let us handle the catering, sweetheart," my mom said 6 months before the date. "You have so much on your plate." I hesitated. I had already chosen a catering company, a local farm-to-table place that Derek and I both loved. But she insisted, and Derek's mother, Linda, agreed. "We've both thrown dozens of parties," Linda said, her smile never reaching her eyes. "Trust us." I trusted them. That was my first mistake. The next few months became a slow erosion of every choice I had made. The elegant hand-painted invitations I designed. My mom said they were too plain and ordered a cheaper version with gold foil that looked like a casino flyer. The rustic barn venue I'd booked a year in advance. Linda claimed it was too far for the elderly guests and convinced Derek to switch to a banquet hall she knew, a place with low ceilings, beige walls, and a dance floor the size of a postage stamp. I cried when he told me. He said he was just trying to keep the peace. I let it go because I wanted peace too. The seating chart became a battlefield. My mom wanted her bridge club at the front tables. Linda wanted her business partners. My own best friend, who had known me since kindergarten, was placed at table 17 near the kitchen. When I protested, my mom waved a hand. "You'll have the whole night to talk to her. Don't be difficult." By the week of the wedding, I had stopped recognizing the event we were about to have. The floral arrangements my mom picked were orange and burgundy, colors I had never mentioned. The DJ she hired specialized in polka. Derek shrugged and said, "It'll be fine. Everyone will be drunk anyway." I smiled. I nodded. I told myself that the only thing that mattered was that at the end of the night, I would be married to the man I loved. And then the day came. The morning of my wedding, I woke up in a hotel room with my 2 best friends. I was supposed to feel excited. Instead, I felt a knot in my stomach the size of a fist. I told myself it was nerves. I told myself every bride feels this way. When I walked into the reception hall an hour before the ceremony, I stopped breathing. The tables were set with white paper plates. Not chargers. Not china. Paper. The kind you buy in a bulk pack at a warehouse store. The silverware was plastic. The centerpieces were not the elegant eucalyptus and white roses I had approved. They were fake sunflowers in mason jars, each one tied with a gingham ribbon that screamed county fair. I stood in the doorway, my heart hammering against my ribs. My mom was across the room, directing a caterer where to put the punch bowl. "Mom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" She turned and smiled, bright and brittle. "Isn't it darling? We saved so much money, and paper is so much easier to clean up." I didn't want to save money on this. I wanted china. I wanted the caterer we picked. Linda appeared beside her, holding a clipboard like she was running a corporate event. "Honey, nobody notices what they eat from. They'll remember the love in the room." I looked at the paper plates. I looked at the fake sunflowers. I looked at the small dance floor, the beige walls, the table where my best friend would sit near the restrooms. And something in me snapped, but not yet. I was still the good daughter, the easy bride, the one who didn't make waves. "I want the china," I said, my voice trembling. "I want the flowers I chose. I want my wedding." My mom's smile vanished. She stepped close, her perfume cloying. "Do you know how much your father and I have paid for this? Do you know how much Linda has paid? You're being ungrateful." Linda nodded. "We only wanted to help. If you're going to be difficult, maybe you should just go get ready and leave the details to us." I opened my mouth to argue, and then Derek walked in. He was in his suit, his tie loose around his neck. He looked at the paper plates, at the fake sunflowers, at my pale face. "Hey," he said, frowning. "What's going on?" "They changed everything," I said. "The catering, the plates, the flowers." He glanced at his mother. She gave him a small, tight smile. "We're just trying to save you 2 money so you can put a down payment on a house. Isn't that more important than one night?" Derek looked at me. I could see the war in his eyes, The same war that had been raging for months. The need to keep his mother happy. The fear of conflict. The desire to just get through the day. "Babe," he said quietly, "it's just plates. It's just one night." I felt the last bit of hope drain out of me. "Okay," I said. "Okay." I went back to the hotel room. My best friend, Claire, was waiting with champagne. She took one look at my face and set the bottle down. "What happened?" I told her. Every detail. Every compromise. Every time I had swallowed my voice to keep the peace. Claire's face went from concern to furious. "You're the bride. You can say no. It's too late. The guests are already arriving." She grabbed my shoulders. "Then you say no now. Those women are not your wedding planners. They're your mother and your mother-in-law, and they've hijacked your day." I wanted to walk back into that hall and tell them to undo everything. But I was tired. I was so tired of fighting. And a small, defeated part of me thought maybe Derek was right. Maybe it was just plates. So I put on my dress. I fixed my makeup. I smiled for the photos. And then I walked down the aisle. The ceremony was a blur. I remember Derek's hands, warm and steady. I remember saying I do. I remember the small crowd of people who had come to celebrate us, many of them looking confused by the decorations that didn't match the elegant invitations they had received. And then we moved to the reception. I was introduced as Mrs. Derek Ashton. People clapped. We took our seats at the head table. I looked out at the sea of white paper plates, each one waiting to be filled. The first course came out, a salad that looked like it had been assembled from a grocery store bag. Guests picked at it. I heard murmurs. Someone at a nearby table whispered, "I thought she said this was going to be a 5-star caterer." My face burned. The main course was chicken breast with a congealed sauce and instant mashed potatoes. A waiter, no, a volunteer from Linda's church, plopped a scoop onto each paper plate like he was serving a cafeteria line. I watched my dream wedding crumble with every bite. And then my mom stood up. She tapped her glass with a fork. The room went quiet. "I just want to say a few words," she said, her voice syrupy. "As mother of the bride, I've watched my daughter grow into a beautiful woman. And I'm so happy she found Derek." She paused, dabbing at her eyes. "We had a few hiccups along the way." She had some strong opinions about the planning. "But Linda and I worked so hard to give them a day they could afford. And I think it turned out lovely, don't you?" A few people clapped uncertainly. I gripped my fork. Strong opinions. She made me sound difficult. She made me sound like a bridezilla who had been reined in for my own good. Linda stood next. "Derek is my only son. I've waited for this day his whole life. And I'm just so grateful to have such a flexible new daughter-in-law." Flexible. The word hung in the air like a slap. I looked at Derek. He was staring at his plate. And then I looked around the room again. At the paper plates. At the fake sunflowers. At my best friend sitting near the kitchen, clearly trying not to cry on my behalf. At my father, who wouldn't meet my eyes. And I thought, they're not just ruining my wedding. They're telling everyone here that I don't matter. That was the moment the knot in my stomach turned into something else. Something cold and sharp. I stood up. Everyone turned to look at me. My mom's eyes widened. Linda's smile faltered. "Thank you, Mom." "Thank you, Linda," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "I'm so glad you both worked so hard." I paused. The room was silent. "But I think there's been a misunderstanding. This isn't the wedding I planned. These aren't the flowers I chose. This isn't the food I wanted. And these," I picked up a paper plate from the head table, "are not what I asked for." Linda laughed nervously. "Honey, sit down. You're emotional." "I'm not emotional. I'm clear. For the first time today, I'm completely clear." I turned to Derek. His face was pale. "Babe, what are you doing?" "I'm going to ask you one question," I said. "Do you want to marry me? Or do you want to marry your mother?" He opened his mouth, closed it. The silence stretched for an eternity. And then he said, "She's my mom. She was just trying to help." I nodded slowly. I set the paper plate down. "Okay." I looked out at the guests. At my mom, who was now whispering furiously to Linda. At the fake sunflowers. at the dance floor no one would use, and I turned to the venue coordinator, who was standing by the bar, looking horrified. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I'd like to speak with the manager. I believe I have the authority to evict anyone who is not a registered guest of this event." My mother's face went white. "What did you say?" I smiled. "You heard me. These people," I gestured to her and Linda, "are no longer welcome at my wedding." The silence that followed my words was so complete I could hear the ice melting in the punch bowl. My mother's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then fury. "You can't evict me. I'm your mother. I paid for half of this disaster." "Actually," I said, "you paid for the paper plates and the fake flowers. The venue was paid for by Derek and me. Our names are on the contract. And right now, I'm invoking the right to remove any guest I choose." The venue coordinator, a young woman named Marissa who had been avoiding eye contact all night, stepped forward. "Ma'am, is that true?" I pulled my phone from the small pocket sewn into my dress. I had the contract saved. I'd read it obsessively when we first booked, back when I still believed I had control. "Clause 12, I said, my voice clear. "The contracting party retains the right to remove any individual from the premises if they pose a disruption to the event." Marissa took the phone, scrolled, and nodded slowly. "That's correct." My mother's face turned the color of the burgundy flowers she'd chosen. "This is ridiculous. This is your wedding day. You're having a tantrum." "No," I said. "I'm finally having a boundary." Derek stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Okay. Everyone just calm down. This is getting out of hand." I looked at him, really looked at him. At the man who had watched me cry over the venue change and said nothing. At the man who had stood by while his mother and mine dismantled every decision I made. At the man who, when given a choice between me and his mother, had said, "She was just trying to help." "I've been calm for 18 months, I said. "I'm done." Linda grabbed Derek's arm. "You see, this is what we were worried about. She's unstable." I laughed. It was a sound I didn't recognize, low and hard. "I'm unstable because I don't want paper plates at my wedding. I'm unstable because I don't want my best friend sitting next to a trash can. I'm unstable because I finally said no." The guests were frozen. Some had phones out recording. I didn't care. Let them watch. Let them see exactly what had been done to me. My mother started toward me, her finger pointed. "You will sit down right now and apologize to Linda and me, or so help me, or what?" I stepped forward, meeting her. "You'll take away my wedding? You already did that. You'll embarrass me? You've done that too. You'll make me feel small. Congratulations, Mom. You've been doing that my whole life." She stopped. "Every choice I made, you changed. Every opinion I had, you dismissed. Every time I tried to be a person, you told me I was being difficult." My voice cracked, but I didn't stop. "I planned a wedding that reflected Derek and me. And you too, Inch." I looked at Linda, turned it into a potluck at a church basement. Linda's nostrils flared. "We were saving you money. You were saving yourselves embarrassment. Because you wanted to tell your friends you threw the wedding. You wanted the credit without the cost. And you know what? I would have let you. If you had just asked. If you had just said, 'Let us help.' But you didn't. You took over. You erased me." Derek reached for my hand. "Babe, let's just go somewhere private and talk." I pulled away. "No, we're going to talk here. In front of everyone." His jaw tightened. "This isn't the time or place. It's the only time and place. Because if we go somewhere private, you'll talk me into being quiet again. You'll tell me to let it go. You'll tell me to be the bigger person. And I've been the bigger person for every single day of this engagement. I'm done." I turned back to Marissa. "Please escort my mother and Linda out." My mother's voice rose to a shriek. "You cannot do this. I am your mother." Marissa hesitated, looking between us. 2 security guards had appeared near the entrance. I recognized them from the venue's event staff. "Ma'am," Marissa said gently, "the contract is clear. If the contracting party requests removal, we have to comply." My mother grabbed the edge of a table, her knuckles white. "I am not leaving. I paid for the food. I paid for the decorations. You paid for some of the food, I corrected. The cheaper food. And the decorations I didn't want. But the venue is ours. The bar is ours. The contract is ours. And right now, I am asking you to leave. Linda was already moving toward the door, dragging a stunned Derek with her. Come on, let her have her little tantrum. She'll regret this tomorrow. I won't, I said. I promise you I won't. The security guards approached my mother. She stared at them, then at me, her expression a mix of rage and disbelief. You are making a mistake. Maybe, I said, but it's my mistake. She straightened her dress, lifted her chin, and walked toward the exit. At the door, she turned. Don't call me when you need help. Don't call me when he leaves you. Don't call me for anything. I won't, I said. She walked out. Linda followed, pulling Derek with her. He looked back at me once, his face twisted with something that might have been fear or anger or regret. I couldn't tell anymore. The doors swung shut behind them, and then it was just me, a room full of silent guests, and the echo of what I had done. Claire was the first to move. She crossed the room and wrapped her arms around me. You did the right thing, she whispered. You were so brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt hollow, like I had cut out something essential and was now standing in the cold. My father approached slowly. He hadn't spoken all night. He had sat at the head table, watching, eating his rubber chicken, saying nothing. Are you okay? He asked. I looked at him. Did you know? He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded. And you let them do it? Your mother, he started. No, I cut him off. Don't. Just don't. He fell silent. I turned away. I looked out at the guests. Some were packing up, clearly uncomfortable. Others were whispering. A few were watching me with something that looked like admiration. I walked to the center of the dance floor. I picked up the microphone the DJ had been using for his limp announcements. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry this isn't the wedding you expected. I'm sorry for the paper plates and the cold chicken. I'm sorry you had to witness that. I took a breath. But here's what I'm not sorry about. I'm not sorry for standing up for myself. I'm not sorry for refusing to pretend that everything was fine. And I'm not sorry for choosing me for once in my life. A few people clapped. Tentative at first, then louder. Claire grabbed my hand. What do you want to do now? I looked at the paper plates, the fake sunflowers, the beige walls, the dance floor that was too small. I want to dance, I said, and I want champagne, and I want to celebrate the fact that I just saved myself from a lifetime of being someone I'm not. Claire grinned. She ran to the bar and grabbed a bottle. The DJ, looking relieved to have direction, put on something upbeat, and I danced, in my wedding dress, on a dance floor too small, with my best friend and the guests who had stayed. It wasn't the wedding I planned, but it was the first moment all day that felt like mine. The next morning, I woke up in my hotel room alone. Claire had stayed until I fell asleep, but she had her own life to get back to. The sun was too bright through the curtains. My head throbbed from champagne and tears. I reached for my phone. 73 text messages, 12 missed calls, a voicemail from Derek that I deleted without listening, a voicemail from my mother that I deleted too, and an email from the venue with a subject line, Incident Report, June 17th wedding. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a formal summary of the eviction, signed by Marissa. Attached was a copy of a contract with a highlighted section that confirmed I had acted within my rights. I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. What had I done? I had married a man who chose his mother over me. I had evicted my own mother from my wedding. I had made a scene in front of 100 people. I had ended the night dancing alone in a dress that cost more than my first car. But I was married. That was real. There was a marriage certificate somewhere, signed by the officiant, witnessed by Claire and Derek's best man. Legally, I was bound to a man who had watched his mother serve my guests paper plates and said nothing. The weight of that settled over me like a wet blanket. I called Claire. She answered on the first ring. Are you okay? No, I said. What do I do now? She was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to go back in time and never say yes. That's not an option. Then I don't know. She sighed. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm coming to get you. We're going to get coffee. And then we're going to figure out what kind of marriage you're actually in. When she arrived, I was still in my dress, sitting on the edge of the bed. She brought me jeans and a sweater and helped me out of the heavy white fabric. I folded it carefully, like a dead thing I was preparing to bury. We went to a coffee shop around the corner. I ordered something with too much sugar and sat in a booth by the window. Claire waited. She was good at that. Derek hasn't called, I said. He texted. Just said we need to talk. Are you going to talk to him? I don't know what to say. She stirred her coffee. Can I tell you something? Please. I never liked him. I blinked. What? She looked uncomfortable. I didn't say anything because you seemed happy. But the way he let his mother walk all over you, the way he never stood up for you, I saw it. We all saw it. Who's we? Me. Your other friends. Your dad. She paused. Even some of his friends. I felt like the floor had dropped out. His friends. Yeah, they think he's weak. They told him not to let his mother change the venue. He did it anyway. I set my cup down. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because you loved him. Because you were planning your wedding. Because we thought maybe you knew and you were okay with it. She reached across the table. But last night, when you stood up and said no, that was the first time I've seen you look like yourself in 2 years. 2 years. That's how long Derek and I had been together. 2 years of me shrinking. I thought about the beginning. The way he'd made me laugh. The way he'd held my hand. The way he'd said he loved how easy I was to be with. Easy. That was the word. I had made myself easy for him. Small. Compliant. A version of me that didn't make waves. And when I finally made a wave, he couldn't handle it. I pulled out my phone. I scrolled to Derek's text. We need to talk. I typed, I agree. But not today. Maybe not ever. I didn't send it. I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. What are you going to do? Claire asked. I'm going to go home, I said. Our home. And I'm going to see what happens when I stop being easy. The apartment was empty when I got there. Derek's car wasn't in the lot. His keys weren't on the hook. I walked through the living room, looking at our things. The couch we'd picked together. The art on the walls, all of it his, because I didn't want to be difficult. The kitchen where I cooked meals, he never complimented. I opened my laptop. I had emails to answer, a job to return to on Monday. I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting. Then I saw it, a folder on the kitchen counter, tucked under a stack of mail. It was labeled wedding expenses. I pulled it out. Inside were receipts, dozens of them. The venue deposit, I recognized that. The photographer, that was ours too. But there were others. Catering from a company I'd never heard of. Decorations from a craft store. A check written to Linda for event coordination. I flipped to the bottom. There was a handwritten tally, the math scrawled in Derek's handwriting. Mom and Linda contributions. $3,400 are contributions. $12,800 total actual cost. $16,200. My hands started to shake. I'd given Derek my half of the budget, $8,000 months ago. He was supposed to pay the vendors. But here, on this paper, the math didn't add up. I grabbed the receipt for the caterer we had originally booked, the farm-to-table place we both loved. The deposit was there, $2,500. But there was no final payment. Just a note in Derek's handwriting, canceled. Mom found cheaper. I found the receipt for the florist I had chosen. Deposit, $800. Also canceled. The venue we ended up with, the one Linda found. The receipt showed they paid $1,200 for a space that should have cost 5 times that. I sat down on the kitchen floor, surrounded by paper. Derek had taken my money. He had let his mother cancel the vendors I chose. He had booked cheaper alternatives, and he had pocketed the difference. I pulled out my phone again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called my bank. I asked for a record of all withdrawals from our joint account in the last 6 months. While I waited, I found more. A Venmo transfer from Derek to Linda for $2,000 labeled wedding help. A check to his cousin for sound equipment that was never used. A credit card bill with charges to a liquor store the day of the wedding for alcohol I never saw. When the bank statement came through, I stared at the numbers. Derek had withdrawn $7,400 from our joint account in the 3 months leading up to the wedding. He had told me he was paying vendors, but according to the receipts, less than half of that money had actually gone to the wedding. The rest had disappeared. I sat in the middle of the kitchen, the papers spread around me like evidence at a crime scene. My wedding had been a lie, not just a disappointment, a fraud. Derek had taken my savings, let his mother and mine destroy every choice I made, and pocketed the money I thought was building our future. And I had married him anyway. I felt the tears come, hot and fast. I cried for the wedding I lost. I cried for the money I'd never see again. I cried for the 2 years I spent becoming someone small. But when the tears stopped, something else took their place. Anger, cold and sharp and clean. I picked up my phone and called a lawyer. The lawyer's name was Elaine Mercer. I found her through a recommendation from a coworker who had gone through a messy divorce. Elaine specialized in family law and financial fraud, and when I called her office at 9 on a Monday morning, she took my call within 10 minutes. "Tell me everything," she said. Her voice was calm, unhurried. I told her about the receipts, the bank statements, the Venmo transfers, the canceled vendors, the paper plates, the fake sunflowers, the $12,000 I had contributed that somehow became a $16,000 wedding that looked like it cost too. "You said you're married," Elaine said. "The ceremony was Saturday?" "Yes." "Have you consummated the marriage?" I paused. The question caught me off guard. "No. I stayed at the hotel." "He went with his mother." "Good. In some states, that can be a factor in annulment. But we'll focus on the financial aspect first. You have documentation. I have everything. Receipts, bank statements, the contract with the venue, text messages. Send me everything. And I need you to answer one question honestly. Do you want to stay married to this man?" I looked at the papers still spread across my kitchen floor. "No." Then we move fast, before he has time to hide anything else. 3 hours later, Derek walked through the front door. He looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red. When he saw me sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a stack of papers beside me, he stopped. "We need to talk," he said. "Yes, we do." He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he reached for my hand. I pulled it back. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice strained. "You evicted my mother from our wedding. You made a scene. You haven't answered my calls. And now you're looking at me like I'm a stranger. Because I'm realizing I never really knew you." He flinched. "That's not fair." "You know what's not fair?" I slid a receipt across the table. "This, the caterer we originally booked. You canceled it without telling me." He glanced at it. His jaw tightened. "My mom said." "I don't care what your mom said. You canceled my choices. You took my money. And you let her replace everything with garbage. We were trying to save money for the house." "Were you?" I pulled out the bank statement. "Because according to this, you withdrew $7,400 from our joint account in the 3 months before the wedding. But the total cost of the wedding, according to your own tally, was $16,000. Our share was $12,800. So where did the extra money go?" He stared at the paper. His face was pale. "Derek, I'm going to ask you one time. Where did the money go?" He didn't answer. "I already know," I said. $2,000 to your mother on Venmo. $1,500 to your cousin for sound equipment that was never used. $800 to a liquor store the day of the wedding, but the bar was cash bar, so that liquor never showed up. And the rest, cash withdrawals, ATM fees, small amounts that wouldn't trigger an alert." He was breathing hard now. "It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is." He ran his hands through his hair. "I had debts, credit cards. I got behind when I was between jobs. I didn't want you to know. So you stole from me." "I didn't steal. You took money I earned. Money I saved. Money I gave you in good faith to pay for our wedding. And you used it to pay your debts while you let your mother serve my guest paper plates. That is theft, Derek. He slammed his hand on the table. I was going to pay it back. When? When were you going to pay it back? When we were married. When we had a mortgage. When I was pregnant and couldn't work. I stood up. You weren't going to pay it back. You were going to keep taking. He stood too. You don't know that. I know you lied to me for months. I know you let your mother humiliate me. I know you took my money and hid it. And I know that when I finally stood up for myself at our wedding, you walked out with your mother instead of with me. His face crumpled. I was scared. So was I. But I stayed. You ran. He reached for me again. I stepped back. I've already talked to a lawyer, I said. I'm filing for an annulment. The word hung in the air between us. His hands dropped to his sides. You can't, he whispered. I can. And I will. Our families. Everyone will know. Everyone already knows, Derek. Everyone saw the paper plates. Everyone saw you walk out. Everyone saw me stand up and say no. He sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. What do you want me to do? I want you to pay me back. Every cent you took. I want you to sign the annulment papers. And I want you to never speak to me again. He looked up, his eyes wet. I loved you. You loved what I made easy for you. And I'm not easy anymore. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Elaine moved fast. She filed the annulment petition on Wednesday, citing fraud and lack of consummation. By Friday, Derek had been served. His mother called me 47 times. I counted. She left voicemails that started with, "How dare you?" and ended with, "You'll regret this." I saved them all. Elaine said they might be useful. My mother called too. She left one message. You've made your choice. Don't come crying when you have nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't call back. Instead, I focused on the evidence. Elaine sent a demand letter to Derek's attorney with a detailed accounting of every missing dollar. We had the receipts, the bank statements, the texts where he confirmed the canceled vendors, the Venmo transfers to his mother, the credit card bills showing his debt. It took him 8 days to respond. His attorney, a nervous man named Mr. Parnell who specialized in making excuses, offered a settlement. Derek would repay $5,000 immediately and the remaining $2,400 in installments over a year. He would sign the annulment papers without contest. Elaine called me with the offer. We can push for more, she said, but an annulment this fast is rare. If he fights it, it could drag out for months. What do you recommend? Take the money. Get the annulment. Cut him out of your life completely. I agreed. The hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks after the wedding. It was a brief, clinical affair. A judge reviewed the evidence, noted that the marriage had never been consummated, and declared it void ab initio, as if it had never happened. I walked out of the courthouse with my maiden name restored and a check for $5,000 in my hand. I didn't look back. But Derek wasn't the only one who owed me. 2 weeks after the annulment, I drove to my parents' house. My mother's car was in the driveway. My father's truck was gone. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. The door opened. My mother stood there, her expression hardening when she saw me. What do you want? I want to talk. We have nothing to talk about. I stepped forward, and she stepped back. It was a small victory, but I took it. I walked into the living room. The house looked the same as always. Immaculate, controlled, suffocating. I sat on the couch. She stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. I'm here about the wedding, I said. The wedding is over. You made sure of that. I'm here about the money. She went still. You told me you and Linda paid for half the wedding. But the receipts tell a different story. You contributed $2,000. Linda contributed $1,400. The rest, the venue, the photographer, my dress, came from me and Derek. We helped with the planning. You helped destroy the planning. You canceled my vendors. You changed my flowers. You served my guests paper plates. And you told everyone you were doing me a favor. Her mouth tightened. We saved you thousands of dollars. You saved yourselves embarrassment. Because you wanted to look generous without actually being generous. I pulled a sheet of paper from my bag. This is the total amount I paid for the wedding. $16,200. I've recovered $5,000 from Derek. But you and Linda cost me more than money. You cost me my dignity." She scoffed. "Your dignity was never in question until you made a scene. I want the 2,000 back." She laughed. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. You're not getting a penny from me." I stood up. "Then I'll see you in small claims court." Her laugh died. "You wouldn't." "I have receipts. I have texts. I have witnesses who heard you say you were paying for the catering. I have bank statements showing the catering you paid for never existed because you canceled it." She stared at me, her face slowly draining of color. "You stole from me, Mom, just like Derek did, and I'm done letting you get away with it." I walked to the door. She followed. "Wait," she said. Her voice was different now, smaller. "Let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You have 2 weeks to send me the money. After that, my lawyer files the claim." I opened the door. "Your father will be so disappointed," she said. I turned back. "He already is. But not in me." I walked out and didn't look back. Linda was harder. She lived in a gated community, 20 minutes from the city. I had only been there a few times, always at Derek's insistence, always on her terms. She never liked me. I was never good enough for her son. I sat in my car outside the gate for 10 minutes, watching the security guard check IDs. Then I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. "What?" "I'm outside. I want to talk." "We have nothing to talk about." "Then I'll wait here until you come out. Or I can drive to Derek's work and talk to him there." A long silence. Then, "Fine. 5 minutes." The gate opened. I drove in. Her house was the largest on the block, a sprawling colonial with manicured hedges and a fountain in the driveway. She answered the door in a silk blouse, her hair perfectly styled, her smile absent. "This is a surprise," she said, stepping back to let me in. "I thought you'd have the decency to disappear. I thought you'd have the decency to be honest about the money." She led me to the living room, a museum of expensive furniture no one used. She sat in a wingback chair and gestured for me to sit across from her. "What about the money?" she asked. "You told Derek you were contributing to the wedding. You gave him $2,000. But you also took $2,000 from him, Venmo, wedding help. So net zero." Her expression didn't change. "I helped with the planning. You helped yourself to my budget. The venue you chose was $1,200. You told Derek it was $5,000. He gave you the difference. I don't know what you're talking about." "I have the receipts." She smiled. It was a cold, practiced smile. "You can try to take me to court, but I have better lawyers than you. And I have a son who will say whatever I tell him to say. Derek already signed an annulment. He already admitted to taking the money. His testimony is on the record." Her smile flickered. "I'm not here to threaten you with court," I said. "I'm here to tell you what happens if you don't pay me back." She waited. "I have a list of every vendor you canceled, every contract you interfered with, every lie you told. And I have a list of everyone who attended the wedding, your friends, your business partners, your church congregation." Her hands tightened on the arms of the chair. "If you don't repay the money you stole from the wedding, every dollar, I will send a detailed letter to every person on that list. They will know exactly how much you contributed. They will know about the paper plates. They will know that you used my wedding to line your own pockets. You wouldn't. I have nothing left to lose. You, on the other hand, have a reputation." We stared at each other across the cold, perfect room. "How much?" she said. $1,400, the exact amount you withdrew from Derek." "Fine. I'll send a check. Today." She nodded once. I stood up. "One more thing. If you ever try to contact me again, if you send Derek to my apartment, if you call my work, if you speak to anyone in my family, I will follow through on every word I said." She didn't answer. I walked out. The checks came. My mother's arrived in a plain envelope with no return address. It was for the full $2,000. Linda's came by courier, hand-delivered, for $1,400. I deposited both and called Elaine. "That's everything," I said. "Almost," she said. "There's one more person who owes you." I frowned. "Who?" "You. You owe yourself the peace you've been chasing your whole life." I laughed. It was the first real laugh I'd had in weeks. "I'm working on it." The last check cleared on a Tuesday. I watched the deposit appear in my account. $1, $400 from Linda, $2,000 from my mother, and felt something shift inside me. Not joy, not relief, something quieter, something that felt like closing a door that had been open too long. I had started the summer planning a wedding. I was ending it with my maiden name, a bank account that was finally whole, and a future that looked nothing like what I had imagined. For the first time in years, that felt like a gift. I moved out of the apartment a week after the annulment was finalized. Derek had already taken most of his things. He left the couch we picked together, the art on the walls, the pots and pans I used to cook dinners he never thanked me for. I packed what was mine into boxes and donated the rest. Claire came to help. We worked in silence for most of the morning, filling boxes, taping them shut, stacking them by the door. When we finished, we sat on the empty living room floor with takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine. "How do you feel?" she asked. I looked around the room. The walls were bare. The windows let in the late afternoon sun. The apartment had never looked so peaceful. Like I just woke up from a dream I didn't know I was having. She smiled. "That's poetic. It's honest. I spent 2 years trying to be what Derek wanted, trying to be easy, trying to be small. And the whole time, I thought I was being loved." I took a sip of wine. But love doesn't ask you to disappear. Claire set her glass down. "Can I tell you something my mom told me after my divorce?" "Please," she said. "You don't miss him. You miss the person you thought you were when you were with him." And I didn't understand it at first. But then I realized I had built this whole version of myself around being his wife. When he left, I didn't know who I was anymore. I nodded slowly. That's exactly it. I was so focused on being the bride, being the fiancée, being the daughter who didn't make waves. I forgot to be me. "So who are you now?" I thought about it. I'm someone who serves herself first. Someone who says no. Someone who evicts her own mother from her wedding if she has to. I laughed. I'm someone who's not afraid to be difficult anymore. Claire raised her glass. To being difficult. We clinked glasses. The new apartment was smaller than the old one. 1 bedroom, a kitchen I could reach from the couch, a balcony that faced a brick wall. It was mine. I painted the living room a color Derek would have hated. A deep, warm blue. I hung art I picked myself. I bought a rug that cost too much and didn't match anything. I cooked dinner for one and ate it on the couch with a book I'd been meaning to read for years. The first week was hard. The silence in the apartment was louder than I expected. At night, I would lie awake and replay the wedding, the paper plates, the look on Derek's face when I asked him to choose. I would wonder if I had been too harsh, too quick, too angry. But then I would remember the receipts, the Venmo transfers, the canceled vendors, the way he had taken my money and hidden it like I wouldn't notice. And I would remember that the anger wasn't the problem. The problem was that I had spent years swallowing it. The second week was easier. I went back to work. I told my coworkers what happened. Not the full story, but enough. They were kind. They didn't treat me like a victim. They treated me like someone who had made a hard choice and survived. My boss, a woman named Diane who had been through her own divorce, pulled me aside one afternoon. "You're different," she said. "Different how? You used to say yes to everything. Extra projects, late nights covering for people. Now you say no." She smiled. "I like it. Keep it up." I did. The first time my mother reached out was 3 months after the annulment. She sent a text. "Can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to answer. Part of me wanted to hear her voice, to know if she had changed, to believe that maybe she finally understood. But I remembered the way she had stood at my wedding, waving her hand like my opinions were dust. I remember the voicemail she left after I evicted her, "Don't come crying when you have nothing." I remembered the way she had dismissed me my whole life, making me small so she could feel large. I typed, "I'm not ready." She didn't respond. Linda never reached out. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she had told her friends I was mentally unstable and that Derek had dodged a bullet. I didn't care. The people who mattered knew the truth. Derek sent one final message 6 weeks after the annulment. It was a long email, full of apologies and excuses and promises to change. He said he was in therapy. He said he had finally told his mother the truth about the money. He said he hoped I could forgive him someday. I read it twice. Then I deleted it. Forgiveness wasn't the point. The point was that I had stopped needing anything from him. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I found myself standing in a banquet hall again. It was Claire's engagement party. She had asked me to be her maid of honor, and I had said yes without hesitation. But when I walked into the venue, a beautiful space with exposed brick and string lights and tables set with real china, my stomach clenched. Claire saw my face. She grabbed my arm. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's just," I looked around. "It's beautiful. It's everything you wanted. And I have you to thank for that." She pulled me toward a table. When I started planning, I asked myself, what would my maid of honor do? And I remembered you standing up at your own wedding, telling everyone that your choices mattered. So I told my mother and his mother that I was planning this myself. And if they didn't like it, they could sit in the back and smile. I laughed. How did they take it? Not great, but they got over it. She squeezed my hand. "You taught me something that day. You taught me that the wedding isn't about the families. It's about the two people starting a life together. And if you don't start that life on your own terms, you'll spend the rest of it trying to catch up." I looked at the room again. The flowers were white roses and eucalyptus, exactly what I had wanted for my own wedding. The tables had cloth napkins and real silverware. A DJ was setting up with a playlist Claire had curated herself. It was the wedding I had dreamed of, and watching it come together for my best friend, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not because I had gotten what I wanted, but because I had learned that what I wanted mattered in the first place. The lessons came slowly, in the quiet moments. Lesson 1, being difficult is not a crime. For years, I had been told that my opinions were too strong, my standards too high, my voice too loud. I had been trained to apologize for existing. But standing up at my wedding, watching my mother's face change from smug to shocked, I realized something. The people who called me difficult were the same people who benefited from my silence. My difficulty was not a flaw. It was a wall, and I was finally learning to let it stand. Lesson 2. Love doesn't ask you to disappear. Derek loved me because I was easy. I had made myself small for him, and he had thanked me by making me smaller. Real love, the kind that lasts, doesn't ask you to shrink. It asks you to grow. It asks you to take up space. It asks you to be exactly who you are, even when who you are is inconvenient. Lesson 3. Your family doesn't get to rewrite your story. My mother thought she could control my wedding, my marriage, my life. She thought that because she gave me life, she could dictate how I lived it. But the moment I walked out of her house with her check in my pocket, I took my story back. She can tell herself whatever she wants. She can say I was ungrateful, difficult, unstable. But I know the truth. And the truth is that I am the one who finally said no. Lesson 4. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. I didn't destroy my mother's reputation. I didn't sue Linda into bankruptcy. I didn't make Derek's life a living hell. I took back what was mine, my money, my name, my future, and I walked away. Sometimes justice is just leaving. Sometimes it's closing the door and not looking back. Sometimes it's choosing yourself when everyone else has chosen someone else. Lesson 5. You can start over. 6 months after the annulment, I was single, living in an apartment I loved, planning my best friend's wedding and sleeping through the night. I wasn't healed. I wasn't over it. But I was here. And that was enough. If you've ever been excluded by your family, if you've ever been told your voice was too loud, your standards too high, your existence too inconvenient, drop a broken heart in the comments. You're not alone, and you are not the problem. I spent years thinking that if I could just be quieter, smaller, easier, I would finally be loved. But love doesn't work that way. Love doesn't require you to disappear. Love requires you to show up, as you are, with all your edges and angles and inconvenient truths. The people who can't handle that, they were never going to love you anyway. It's been a year since the wedding now. I'm sitting on my balcony, the one that faces the brick wall, watching the sun set behind a building I can't see. My apartment is quiet. My rug is still too expensive. My walls are still that deep, warm blue. I don't think about Derek anymore. I don't think about my mother's voice on the voicemail, or Linda's cold smile, or the paper plates stacked on a table that was supposed to hold china. I think about the moment I stood up in that banquet hall, my dress heavy around me, and said no. I think about the silence that followed, the way the room held its breath, the way I held mine, and then I think about the champagne, the dancing, the feeling of being alone in a room full of people and realizing that alone was better than small. I think about the moment I chose myself. It wasn't the wedding I planned. It wasn't the life I imagined, but it was mine. Every difficult, expensive, impossible piece of it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Subscribe to Betrayal Files for more stories where trust breaks and truth emerges. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments below.